if people believe that you understand their problem, they will assume you can solve your problem. A lot of organizations get this backwards, though, and they spend all their time talking about how fantastic their solution is, and not nearly enough time showing whether it's the clinician, whether it's a patient, whether it's an administrator somewhere in the middle of the process, showing that person that they understand the problems and the pain points that they face. That's the number one thing that you can do. And if you do that well, you don't have to solve every single technical case perfectly. You just have to show that alignment that you care about what's important to that person.
Welcome, MedTech Gurus. Today we have a fantastic guest with us. Erin Rollenhagen is the founder and CEO of People Friendly Tech, a UX strategist and the author of Love at First Launch, a visionary's guide to bringing extraordinary tech to life. Erin has led over 200 successful technology launches across healthcare, finance, and other highly regulated industries. Her work has been featured in TechCrunch, Axios, and national award platforms. She is known for helping visionary leaders design people-friendly tech that balances compliance, usability, and emotional connection. In today's episode, Erin will show us how MedTech companies can preserve the magic of their original ideas while navigating the realities of scaling, regulation, and clinical adoption. Hey, Erin, are you ready to be our guru today?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Yeah, I love it. We're very excited to have you. So tell us something fun or interesting about yourself or your family so we can get to know you a little better.
Yeah. I love dogs. I have 2 corgis. And we've always had dogs in our office that have been an important part of our office culture. And if you look at our logo, that silhouette of a dog with a little astronaut backpack on, that's my dog, Bruno.
Oh, I love it. Did you have to pay Bruno any royalties or modeling fees?
Yeah, his rider is a little excessive.
I would think so. So, Erin, I was intrigued when I was doing my background research for this episode. You've launched over 200 tech products. So with that, what inspired you to write Love at First Launch? And how does that philosophy apply specifically to the MedTech space? Can you provide some insights there?
Absolutely. In our work over nearly 20 years with a variety of founders, I kept seeing the same sorts of themes come up over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And you'd have these really passionate founders who have a great idea for something that they know could make the world a better place, make people healthier, make them happier. And they encounter all these obstacles in the process of bringing that to fruition. And we see so many of them, I thought we can help them prepare for and alleviate some of these obstacles that would otherwise water down their vision. When I look at the MedTech space, there's so much compliance involved. It can be such a long process from a regulatory standpoint that there's a lot of room for those issues to creep in. So we'd love to be able to help some of those passionate founders be able to actually bring their vision to fruition.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It sounds like, it's kind of a guide to really help maybe take that chance, right? And step out there and do it and follow that dream.
Absolutely. The founders that we work with, some of them are first-time founders. Some of them have launched products in the past, but often if they've had a past experience, maybe they launched something and they felt like the end result was a little watered down. It wasn't quite what they thought they were going to be launching. And we want to prevent that. And there are identifiable ways to do that and ways to structure your process so you don't end up with something that's not quite what you thought it would be.
Yeah, that's interesting. It kind of leads into my next question because, we've interviewed a lot of innovators here on MedTech Gurus, and many of them, especially with the healthcare focus, they feature on features and or focus on features and compliance. But you're emphasizing an emotional connection. So, why does the user experience matter just as much, if not more, in MedTech? Can you help us with that?
I can. If we boil down what's the difference between a successful product and a product that doesn't quite do what it was intended to do, I can state that difference in 5 words. It makes people feel better. That's really the difference between a product that succeeds and a product that doesn't. And yet, as founders, the the bullet point list is this long. We have so many ideas, and I do the same thing when I'm a founder. That we have so many ideas for everything it's going to do and how fantastic that's going to be. But if the user doesn't feel that, if they don't have that feeling that I'm cared for, I'm supported, I'm more confident, I'm better off after using it, none of it's going to matter.
Yeah, I like that. In by making people feel better, I think in this instance we're talking not only the patients but the clinical individuals that are applying this technology. Is that correct?
That's true. It's got to be everyone throughout the process. So if you're trying to get technology ultimately to impact patients, there's a chain of people that technology has to work through to be able to get there. And everyone throughout that chain has to experience that positive impact, whether it's making them more confident, whether it's making them more efficient, so that they're continuing to promote the use of that product.
Do you find, and I might put you on the spot a little bit with this question, but do you find that it's really important to have like a total immersion with that customer and really sharing a lot of the technical aspect and the features of the product early on?
You mean when we're working as consultants?
Yeah, when you're working with consultants from a product development standpoint, they're thinking about getting ready to go to market, and is the criteria getting that feedback from the customer as well in terms of that, along with the industrial design components of it?
Yes. I think when we look at that process, sometimes there's a little bit of apprehension in talking to consumers. And you hear the Henry Ford quote a lot. If I would have asked people what they'd wanted, they would have said faster horses. And there's some debate as to whether Henry Ford actually said that. But what we do know is that Ford actually spent a lot of time paying attention to how people go about their day and what they need and what they could use to make their lives better. And so when we talk about talking to customers, we're not necessarily saying you're going to ask the customer exactly what they think you should build. That's not their job. But we want to understand, what are their pain points? What is really important to them? Because at the end of the day, you have to achieve adoption, or nothing's going to matter. And so you have to find that connection point between something that the customer cares about enough to take action and the ultimate problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and thank you for that. In your book, Love at First Launch, you talk about preserving the magic, right? The magic of a product's original vision. For our gurus out there, that are thinking about bringing medtech innovations to life, what are some of the practical ways they can hold on to that spark, right? And even when navigating the complex compliance and getting ready to scale, can you provide us some insights with that?
I think when we are talking about preserving the magic, there's a couple things. One, you want to have a banner that you're flying over this whole project. And it's really tempting to try to make some of those great features that you're so excited to deliver, make those the banner. But those can't be the banner, because things are going to evolve as you go through this process. Some of those features might change. Some of those features might run into compliance hurdles that you're not able to overcome, and the feature has to be jettisoned. And so what you want to focus on is what's going to be different in that person's life if you are wildly successful. And that often takes asking the question a few times to get there. So if I were to be interested, let's use an example from financial services, another highly regulated industry. If I wanted to create an app to help someone do their taxes, and I would say, okay, well, I'm going to take some of the pain out of doing their taxes. That's great, but it's not quite revolutionary at that point. So what would happen if I were wildly successful at helping someone do their taxes better? Well, they might not avoid it so much. They might feel more comfortable doing their taxes in a timely way. It's great, but we still haven't really achieved a revolution. So what would happen then? Well, maybe they could have less anxiety around their finances generally and start to approach their finances in a healthier way. Getting warmer, but maybe not quite there yet. But if we did that, then we could have people who had a more holistic, positive view of their finances, and were saving better for retirement, managing their finances better, and leading happier, less stressful lives. That is revolutionary. Mm-hmm. And so it's a matter of continuing to ask questions until we get something that has that broader societal impact that really encapsulates that magic.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And as you're explaining that, and thank you for that, I'm just kind of thinking that there must be some really long sessions around the table and the whiteboard, boiling that down. Do you find that that's often just a challenging process because they're so into the technology? How does that work? Can you share a couple examples with us?
Sure. There's a couple different types of people that we encounter. And when you get your pure visionary, they usually don't find this very challenging at all because their mind already goes there. Their mind is already all about changing the world. And and so they've probably made most of these leaps themselves already. But then you'll get the people who are more your integrator, more operationally minded types of people. And thinking that way can be very uncomfortable for them because it's a little vague. It's not a series of check boxes to check. And it's a little harder to accomplish. You know, those big goals can be scary. And so, what a lot of the work that we do is trying to let both types of people have their voice and get comfortable with the idea of what that means for them and their role in the organization.
And I'm curious, as you go through that process, developing those ideas and that banner, is it always internal, or do you have like a customer focus group participate in some of that as well?
So, we always want the feedback from the customer. We
Hmm.
won't necessarily ask them what the banner should be, but we'll ask them a lot of questions about their thoughts and feelings around certain topics. For example, we might, if it's a healthcare focus, we might ask questions like, "How often do you think about your health and your family's health? Do you have someone in your corner that you believe is on your side when it comes to your health?" And walk them through a series of questions that might seem a little abstract when you're talking about technology, but we want to zero in on what are their existing feelings about it. Is there something we can build on that would help us gain adoption for this new technology?
Yeah, that's helpful. And now I'm thinking, let's kind of switch to the other end of the equation, right? Because we've developed the banner, we're getting ready to launch. As an organization scales, right, this often leads to some compromise, whether it's engineering or marketing or outreach. So I'm curious about what strategies you use to help med tech companies preserve that initial magic, right, that we're talking about, that magic of the original ideas as their products grow and scale.
There's a quote out there that's be ruthless about your vision and flexible on the details. And I think that really encompasses what we're talking about here. From a practical standpoint, the details tend to happen in the middle. That's where all the compromise occurs. We start off with this really strong vision and everybody's on board, go through a bunch of operational processes, whether that's compliance, marketing, operations. Everybody gets their hand in the pie. Some compromises happen on those details. And then at the end, we want to bring it back to what can we be ruthless about with that vision? Maybe some of those details had to experience a little bit of compromise, but we can still have that passionate focus on the original intention. Maybe that's simple things like working on the language, working on handling some edge cases. Maybe it's bringing in what's the look and feel around what we're doing so that it captures that feeling we're after, but making sure that the compromises that inevitably are going to happen on some of those details don't derail the overall mission.
Do you find that that takes a lot of touch points as they grow and scale? Is this something that maybe you're revisiting on a periodic basis, like every quarter or every 6 months?
It's forever evolving. And part
Hmm.
of that reason is the landscape's forever evolving. So, what's considered cutting edge in tech isn't the same 2 months later as
Hmm.
it was the day you launched. And so, there's always this evolution based on the industry. There's evolution based on the regulations, which are striving to keep up with the industry and typically just slightly behind where the industry is at. And there's also evolution in any business, especially if you're starting a new venture. You're investigating what sells, what can people get interested in, what's the business model here that works, that helps us get the distribution to work the way we need it to work. And so all of those components are creating this sea of change around this product, and the product has to evolve with it without losing that magic.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like it's a lot of navigation through there, right?
Thousands of little details.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. Erin, one of the things that I was really fascinated by when I was looking at your organization and what you do is, well, first of all, I love storytelling, right? I think that's really important. So in medtech especially, clinical or patient adoption are often roadblocks, right? This is the way we've always done it. We don't want to do something new, all of those types of discussions and resistance that we see. So how can your team at UX design help with that storytelling and personalization to improve that trust and engagement with our end users? Do you have any insights for us?
One tip that I would share is that if people believe that you understand their problem, they will assume you can solve your problem.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of organizations get this backwards, though, and they spend all their time talking about how fantastic their solution is, and not nearly enough time showing whether it's the clinician, whether it's a patient, whether it's an administrator somewhere in the middle of the process, showing that person that they understand the problems and the pain points that they face. That's the number one thing that you can do. And if you do that well, you don't have to solve every single technical case perfectly. You just have to show that alignment that you care about what's important to that person.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm wondering, as you said that, if part of your process, do you actually get into some of the sales training and storytelling with some of that?
It certainly depends on the product. There are
Mhm.
organizations where we're strictly focused on the product side, and there are organizations where we're focused on the entire journey. I think it's more powerful when there's alignment throughout the entire journey. As I'm sure you know, if what sales is selling doesn't line up with what the ultimate product is delivering, you're going to have some problems in there.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that whatever you're promising is the same as what's being carried through in delivery. And if I could give a quick tip on that, it's to think about the onboarding experience. So that's the first moment that someone's going to have contact with your product itself. And at that moment, they've been promised some set of things, right? They've been promised a solution to some problem that matters to them. And they may have some trepidation of, is this really going to solve my problem? Maybe I've tried some things in the past and they didn't work. Maybe I have a lot of stress because healthcare can create a lot of anxiety and stress in users around what's happening with their health. And so I've got all this context and this sort of emotional weight around this experience of onboarding to this product. And so often, what's the first thing we do when we onboard someone? We stick a big form in front of them and say, tell us all of this information that we probably ought to already know about you, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And with that, I'm also wondering, I know how difficult sometimes it can be to get clinical adoption and change. Do you find that maybe the sales team is just as resistant?
That hasn't been our experience, to be honest.
Mhm.
I think we found that the sales team is often very close to the problem in a certain way
Mhm.
because they're having those conversations with the potential adopters. And so they know very well what the pain points of the adopters are. So sometimes the sales team is actually driving some of the innovation by bringing some of that feedback back to the team in a way that the organization pays attention to. Because if you say, hey, I can't close these deals because XYZ, suddenly you've got a functional problem in the organization that somebody's willing to take a look at.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. That's really helpful. And Erin, as we record this episode today, it's really evident that AI is becoming more central to health tech. I mean, we hear it all the time with what's going out in the news and stock market and all of that noise that we hear. How can companies use AI and personalization thoughtfully to become create a deeper user connection, without overwhelming or alienating users? Do you have any thoughts for us there?
I think there's a couple of things. One is to pay attention to what the AI can successfully do at a low error rate at the moment you're launching. Everyone knows there's a ton of promise for AI long term, but at this moment, there are things that it does really well and things that we know it's going to have a higher error rate at. The things that there's a higher error rate at, and our research shows we're looking for an error rate that is somewhere under 5%. So we're really looking for a pretty small error rate with it. The things that it can do successfully, that's what you want to do right now. Even if it's really sexy and really enticing, to think about what it might be able to do down the road. Just stick to what it can do really well, because you don't want to lose that trust, especially with something as important as healthcare. The second thing is to think about what makes it better for that customer. People are really sensitive to the idea that corporations are cold-hearted and they're just out to make more money. And so if they get even a hint that something has been done with AI to save the company money, not to serve them better, it's not going to go over well. Mm-hmm. So if you think about things like, if you have something that needs a search, could you use AI to improve the search? Customers are going to be very tolerant of that because it makes their life better. Could you use AI to summarize long and complex information? Again, customers are going to be really excited about that. It makes their life better. If you try to replace all of your customer service with a chatbot, customers may not be excited about that because it smacks of doing something to improve profits versus improve their experience.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I was also reading an article that you wrote on LinkedIn. Why slow decisions kill more projects than bad ones, right? And I love that. Can you help us, our listeners out there, in terms of why is indecision such a silent killer in product development, and how can leaders make faster, smarter decisions?
Absolutely. This is something that I talk a fair amount in the book about, how to keep things on pace. Because what happens when you get things delayed is you end up cutting things you don't really want to cut. Right? That's the end result of that. You can't just ask people to work infinitely faster. It's not going to happen. So something gets cut, and it's usually something that hurts to cut. So we want to keep things on pace, but unfortunately, some of these decisions are hard to make, especially if you look at, let's take the example of a compliance situation. There may be a feature or a certain way of handling things that you're really excited about, that you think is going to make things better, and compliance comes in and says, nope, can't do it. That violates HIPAA or whatever the case may be. What we see often happens is the leader is tempted to delay that decision and say, this decision hurts, it's uncomfortable, I'm going to delay. At that point, the team can't move forward. They're stuck. Work stops on that particular area. If you delay that decision a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, suddenly your options for what to do to work around that decision have shrunk dramatically because we just ate up 3 weeks of the time we would have had to work on it. And so when we talk about making decisions faster, we're trying to make sure that the team has room to react to what are inevitably going to be some compromises and some natural negotiation that happens during the implementation process.
Yes. So with that, it sounds like that would take a lot of communication, right? And stepping up and saying, all right, folks, that didn't work. Where do we go from here? Would that alter the project, or is it more of like a brainstorming session? What happens at that point of inflection?
There's a constant negotiation and iteration process that's happening during implementation. Mm-hmm. And that's just natural. For example, with our company, the UX team, you might think their job is done when we go into development. The mockups have been approved. They can put their feet up and rest. But actually, they still have a lot of work to do because of those inevitable little negotiations that are constantly happening as you encounter real-world obstacles. So just making sure that feedback loop is always available and that collaboration process is planned for to continue throughout, that's going to be really important to making sure that you can respond and deliver an end result that's as great as you want it to be.
Yeah, I might put you on the spot here, but I'm just kind of wondering, without naming names, if there's a little success story that you might be able to share with how that worked.
So I'll give you an example. And this might seem like a fairly mundane example, but sometimes the mundane things are the most important. So working with a health insurance client, we ran into a situation where we were looking at how a user changes their email. The most common reason that a user would need to change their email is they change jobs and they don't have access to the original email anymore. But from a security standpoint, in an account takeover, the first thing an attacker is going to do is go change that person's email. So you've got this conflict where we want to serve the legitimate user really well and let them change their email without friction. But that also creates a risk from a security standpoint, because now you've got someone who, if we just make it easy to do this, if someone's account does get overtaken by a bad actor, we've just, laid the goods bare for them. We don't want to do that. So in that case, the solution, by getting everybody together in a planned way, was to say, okay, we know this is going to happen some percentage of the time. We have to keep the security in place. That's not optional. What we can do is acknowledge to the user when they're in that situation that, hey, if you're trying to change your email and you no longer have access to your previous email, here's the number to call customer service. They will help you. It's a small thing. It's not even a technologically fancy solution, but it helps maintain that care for the user in what could otherwise be a really stressful moment.
Yeah, that's really interesting, right? And thank you for that. But it would also seem like it gave another touch point too, right? If they called customer service, that would open up the opportunity to get some additional feedback. Am I heading down the right path with that?
Absolutely. So assuming that customer service team is trained, of course, to handle a request like that and engage with that user in a meaningful way, that could be a great opportunity to take what could have been an uncomfortable experience, get more feedback from the user, and also make that user feel really supported in that moment.
Yeah, I can see that. So, Erin, this really seems like an exciting time for you and your team. What's next for people-friendly tech? What does the future hold?
A few different things. One of the things that we're really excited about, as we alluded to the issue with trying to make sure that decisions happen quickly, is trying to empower organizations with data at their fingertips so that they can make those decisions really confidently. So that's one thing that we're working on right now. Another thing that I think is just exciting generally is AI has so much potential to reduce the cost of software development. And that's a barrier for so many great ideas that could otherwise do a lot of good in the world. And so I'm excited to be able to work with different and smaller organizations that may not have huge budgets through the use of AI.
Oh yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. First of all, and it'll be interesting to watch you to see where things develop from here. So, Erin, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your time and insights as our guru today. If somebody wants to learn more about you and your team, how do we do that? Do we go to LinkedIn? Is there a website? How do we find out more?
Absolutely. Everyone's welcome to contact me on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Erin Rollenhagen. And our company website is peoplefriendlytech.com, spelled exactly like it sounds.
Oh, that sounds great. I'm going to follow that for sure. So, Erin, once again, thank you so much for all the insights that you brought us today. We really appreciate it, and it was a fun conversation.
Thanks, Tom. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to MedTech Gurus. I am Sylvester Harris, your MC. If you want to learn more about Tom and his consulting services, you can go to www.pctmedical.com or email Tom at tom@pctmedical.com. Now, I can be reached at Sylvester Harris, that's SylvesterHarris 5048@gmail.com, and I'd be pleased to discuss any voiceover work that you may want for your company or broadcast. Hey, thanks so much for listening, and catch us on the next episode of MedTech Gurus.